2.
Welcome to Waiting, where we talk through everything culture, church, and all things in between. Hello.
Hello.
Connor, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, man. You?
Good. Let's go. This is amazing. This is something I've been really excited for, wanting to do for a long time. So it only was right that we'd have one of my best friends, one of my favorite people in the world to be the first guest on this podcast. But before we get to our guest, I would like to just introduce us as a group, as a podcast, as a platform before we get into anything. Our name is Waiting, and that's W-A-D-I-N-G, not waiting. It's waiting. I found that this word is a fishing term, but it means to move through different tensions of water in order to find the best solution to catch. And so I was thinking that is just such a meaningful word when it comes to being a Christian in today's culture, in today's movements, and overall as the church too. So we'll be taking moments every week to talk things culturally and how that plays into church, and also having college students on to talk through those things. My name is Aaron, if you don't know me, and I'm the college pastor here at Grace Community Church in Tempe, Arizona, and I get the privilege to pastor a ministry here that's our college ministry named Unified, and that's a story we can get into in later days, but it birthed out of that I have an all-consuming passion for the local church and wanting to see it be in full unity. And so Waiting is a platform where we can just have college students on and talk more about what they're going through, what they're dealing with, and how to be a Christ follower within today's culture and to love his church. But today I have my friend Connor here. He is from the UK. He was my best friend growing up in high school. But we can get more into how we met. But in further podcasts, don't make fun of me that I won't have a thick British accent. As soon as this guy is going to talk to me, my British accent is going to come out. So leave me alone. All right? It's going to be all right. I'm not faking it. It's just how it is. But anyway, Connor, welcome.
Thank you.
Give us a little bit of a spark note of who you are, where you're from, how you're here.
Yeah, so my name's Connor. I live in Liverpool, England. I'm here for our friend's wedding. Mm-hmm. I am a ex-youth pastor, now just serving at my local church. And yeah, we've been best friends for 14 years. Yep. So I've known each other for a long time.
Pretty amazing. Cool.
Yeah.
We're going to get to know you a bit before we get into the topic of what we're going through today. So I just want to ask you, before we get into things about your life, one thing to notice about Connor is he likes fashion. He likes clothes. He likes to look good. And I'll expose him a little bit here. Before we started today's podcast, he asked to be on his best side. So before we get into all things you, I want to ask you this question about putting together your outfit every morning. Do you pick your shoes first, or do you go top to bottom or bottom to top?
I go middle. Okay. Pants are everything. Okay. If you've got a funky pair of pants on, then you need to go minimal top and bottom. But if you got a plain, you can just mix it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing I've noticed about Connor is when he gets something new, he will wear it all the time until he can't anymore. He just got these shoes. They're pretty sick. Some nice little retro Nikes, and been wearing them every day since you got them.
Yeah, 5 days straight.
Let's go. I love it. All right. So things about you, Connor. Tell us your background. We know you're a Christ follower now, but tell us what led up to that point.
Yeah, so I was born into a non-Christian home. Went to a Church of England school where we'd go to church on Sundays, sing hymns, get bored, fall asleep, go back, and then just know nothing about God, relationship with Jesus. And then when we went to high school, I met you in our first year. Halfway through, you moved over. We didn't like each other. He'll probably tell you that story another time.
He bullied me.
I didn't bully him. I just didn't like him. And in our second year, you invited me to play basketball. Yeah. And you hung around our friends group, right? And we were doing things that you didn't agree with, but you were still there. You invited me to church one Sunday. And I just kept going every Sunday, stay over at yours on a Saturday. And then up to 16, kind of was all out for church. And 16 to 21, just left church. You had left, came over to South Carolina. And there was just fallouts at our church. So I stepped away, lived my life for 5 years, came here for my 21st. I have a bit of depression and anxiety, prayed for God to take it away. He took it away like that. Went back, helped plant a church in Southport, which is a town near Liverpool. And then no turning back, got baptized, became the youth pastor, went through some trials during that time and came through stronger in my faith. And yeah, no turning back.
Yeah. We'll get a little bit more into the culture of church and what that looked like for you in Southport. It's funny hearing you talk about those places because I live so close. But in fact, yes, Connor was my bully. All right. I'm looking right at the camera when this is happening because Connor bullied me and I showed the grace of Jesus to this man and he came back. No, I'm just kidding. But basketball actually made our relationship. We became friends through just having a shared love, which was basketball, and it made us become friends, and eventually I got him to come to church. But I want you to go a bit more into, I mean, you skipped over it, but it's really key. If I'm right, I believe you're the only Christ follower right now in your whole family, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's really unique in itself. And we'll get more into England here in a second, but I want you to tell them real quick about what you've just been through. Well, now being 4 years out of it, but tell us a little bit about what happened with you just recently.
Yeah, so 2018, March 2018, I got diagnosed with cancer. I actually had it twice. So the first time I had testicular cancer and got it removed and everything was great. But actually what they found is I had 9 out of 12 cancers in one tumor, one being very aggressive.
Wow.
So I got tested to see where it was at, and it was in my stomach. So then I had to go into some intense chemotherapy.
Yeah.
Nearly dying at the beginning of it. But during that time, I always say it's a blessing in disguise, and people pull a face when I say that, but it was the time where I grew closer with God, because it's those moments where you have no control over anything.
Yeah.
That God actually, you realize God is in control and he has you. But yeah.
So you've been 4 years healed from cancer.
Yes, sir.
I believe 5 years is like the remission phase that.
Yeah, so you either have 3 or 5 years. If it's intense, it's 5 years. So yeah, 1 more year, and then we're out of the
amazing,
the amber zone.
Praise God that you're free from cancer.
Yes, sir.
It's an amazing story. But Connor's an amazing guy, and I wanted to hear his perspective as we get into culture and church, because he has a unique view that we actually both share as well. So England, let's just be straight up, it's just not a Christian place at all. No. It's I was born and raised there. I lived there till I was 16, and then I faced dramatic changes in terms of Christian culture. So I lived in England, in this town in this city named Preston, where it's very post-Christian. And I'm meaning in my high school of about, I mean, how big was our high school? How many students do you think?
800 altogether.
About 800 students. I knew one Christian in my whole high school, and it was my sister. Like, it just wasn't a thing. I remember being a first year in high school, and I would say, if I said like my dad was a pastor, someone would ask me like, what's that? They would think of like a Catholic priest or a vicar. And so things were just different. And for me, being a Christian in England was, you were all out. You're either all in or all out. Yeah. There wasn't really an in-between of like a lukewarm or cultural Christianity. It was either you're in or not. And then, so I was around that my whole life, had the trials that came with that. And so I gained a really intense faith because I had to have it in order to maintain it in that culture. And then my family and I, we moved to South Carolina when I was 16. And that was kind of the polar opposite, where it was being in the South of America was everyone goes to church. Everyone's a Christian. When I would, with the high school I went to, if I said, oh yeah, my dad's the pastor, at a church, and they would be like, oh, is it the one across the street? And like most people had been to this church in that whole high school at some point. And so now it was seeing a view of, okay, everyone goes to church, but what I started to learn over time, it was actually harder to find people who were sold out followers of Christ. They just had been raised in it, which is almost more difficult. But I was lucky enough to find really close friends really quickly who were sold out Christ followers. One of them's in the room, Dan's in the background, he's just hanging out watching, but we'll have him on soon and we'll talk our story. But so I went from post-Christian culture to Christian culture to then move into Arizona once I graduated high school. And that's kind of like a weird in between, that there's a lot of cultural Christianity, but there's also not. It's a big city, it's not a small town in the South. So what I'm bringing with this podcast and this platform is to talk, how do you gain a faith that is sustainable and maintainable in all cultures? So let's talk England first. So how old were you when you came to Christ? How old were you?
I'd say 14. Yeah, a year into church.
Yeah. So straight away, everyone's like, oh, now Connor's involved with the whole church thing. Like, what's going on, But tell us about now that you're an adult, because I knew what it was like as a kid, as someone in high school, what it was like to be a Christian in England. But tell us what it's like as an adult being a Christ follower.
Yeah, it's different. I think, but it's a blessing as well. Like, all your friends are non-Christians.
Yeah.
Like, because you want to keep yourself out the Christian bubble,
right?
Because then you just get lost. So
yeah.
A lot of your friends are non-Christian. So it's a blessing that you can be that difference in their life. That's right. There's something different about him. I've got a group of friends who know I go to church, and we'll joke around. And the big one is the whole sex topic, like, oh, you have to wait till marriage. But yeah, it's a blessing because you can minister to them just by being a friend to them.
Yeah.
But it's hard as well, right? Because those seasons when it's hard, it's very far and in between who you can go to.
Right. I'd probably jump to say that the biggest and most popular view of Christianity in England is, okay, it isn't what can I get from being a Christian, it is what do I have to lose?
Yeah. Sure.
Or what do I have to stop doing? And so that's the only view, is Christianity's boring. I have to stop having sex with my girlfriend or my boyfriend. I have to stop partying, drinking, doing these things. It's only the quote unquote stopping things and not gaining something. So it's constantly this view of, this sucks. Why would I do this? They're just boring people who don't understand the world at all. And so that's what I want this place to be. It's somewhere where we show that we understand what culture is and we understand what the world is. We are like foreigners. That's what our name is as Christ followers. But we're in the world, and we need to know what that is and what that looks like. And I think one of the biggest tragedies in Christians in our college ministry here in Tempe, Arizona, is, like you just said. You said it very briefly. I want you to touch on it a bit more, of this bubble. Of, you said, I didn't want to be in the Christian bubble, so I'm doing this. Here it's like, it's almost preached that you should stay in this Christian bubble and you should be just oblivious to everything and just stay within your people, Christian people, and that's it, and not be around anyone else. So tell me why you don't want to just be stuck in that one bubble.
I think because Jesus never called us to be comfortable, right? Jesus never said, hey, be a Christian and just go and sit down and be comfortable. So, he tells us to go and make disciples. And you can't make a disciple of a Christian, right? They are already on that journey. You can, be there for them. You can be the church and be in that bubble to help them, but you don't stay there. I think you grow from being uncomfortable. And if we always stayed in our Christian bubble, then no one else is going to come into Jesus. You're not having those conversations in that Christian bubble.
Yeah. We proposed a question to our students last week at Unified, our college ministry, that just gave students an opportunity to say one sentence that seems simple in the Christian walk, that is, I was fill in the blank, but God made me fill in the blank. And that's just a one sentence story of what you were, but why you came to God and what he's made you into. And I had a really amazing conversation with a student this week about that since then. And it was simply that she said, I didn't know how to actually answer that, but she'd been following Jesus her whole life. And so I think here the difference to England is a lot of college students haven't had a journey to become a Christ follower.
wow.
They were just it was there.
Yeah.
And so answering a question of I was this, but now I'm this just seems foreign to a lot of people. But seeing your story and seeing how you've progressed as a Christian is I was once this, fill in the blank, lost, but now I'm found. I was once doing this, but now I'm doing this. But there's always a reason behind it. And so I think the tension that we're wading through in this episode is your Christianity based off of the culture that you're in now? Or is it based off of who God is, and can that sustain in all cultures? Because our students here, a lot of them go to GCU, a lot of them go to ASU, and a lot of them have gained discipleship and how to follow Christ in their 4 years here in Arizona, in their Christian bubble. And it's like, how do we make it that what they are learning as a Christ follower here, when they go into other cultures, in the work sphere, in the business sphere, in anything, can it sustain? And so tell me, like, how do you maintain your ways of following Christ in England when you come over here? What are actually, yeah, this is a better question. What's a key difference you see in terms of actually just the local church here and in England? Like, let's give them just straight facts. Like, okay. How big, how many people was going to your church in Southport that you were a part of?
At peak 105, right. And then it lowered to like 20.
But that was seen as pretty big.
Yeah.
Right. Like
sure.
The church I was at in England when my dad was the pastor at that one, that was like, I think at its peak was about 250, 300 people. And that was massive.
Yeah.
Like huge. That was a mega church in England. So how big is the church you're a part of now in Liverpool?
400 maybe.
400 people.
Yeah.
So that's that. Like the essence, the sense of, oh, like here there's a church that's 1,000 people.
Yeah.
Our church here in Tempe is about 1,000 people, and that's seen as not that big, Yeah. It's just pretty normal. So tell other like key differences that are just quick facts that are different about England.
Church-wise? I was thinking about this morning. I think the big one is the financial backing churches get. Like whether it is just that culture of giving, that culture of tithing, whatever it is, in England, like it's very rare that you're employed by the church. So when I was the youth pastor, I was doing that voluntary, doing maybe 20 hours plus.
Wow.
Definitely in youth ministry, it's a 24/7 job, right?
Like how many people were paid staff at your church?
None.
Zero.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, our pastors were sponsored from churches in Australia, so they could do that full time. But yeah, none. So that can hurt a leader a lot, not because you're not getting paid, but because you have to sustain a full-time job whilst also sustaining your ministry and the trials that come with that. I think the openness of being a Christian, even within church, is different. I think it's not seen as being cool. We were having a conversation with a student the other day that it's cool to be a Christian, but it's so much easier to be open about your journey with Christ in church in America than it is in England. Because in England, you have to be seen as the perfect Christian.
Right.
I think that's maybe it's because of Church of England and how the standards were set. But it's like, you've got a problem, that's just you and Jesus. The community over here for church is amazing. What I've seen, at Grace anyway.
Yeah.
So in England, it's a bit more, you're kind of on your own.
Kind of by yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting you raise the money thing. Hey, that's a pretty tense thing. That's a water of tension that we need to walk through here because, it's just a fact. Churches have more money here in America than England, and it is because of the sheer size and the amount of people who come here and are generous. But one of the tensions we face with college students who want to be in ministry is their mindset is how can I do it without being paid?
Yeah.
And there's that tension of people are like, I want to go into full-time vocational ministry. That's just not language you use in England.
No.
Right? It's not like, oh, my goal is to be a full-time pastor, because that's not a reality. And so I wish there could just be that kind of aspect here, that within college students who are gifted in ministry and see themselves doing local church ministry for the rest of their lives, how can they have a mindset of, I'm going to still pursue this, even if it means for a time being it's not paid, you know? And it's difficult because you want to do something full time that you're really passionate about and be able to be paid for it and provide for your family. But tell us, I mean, when you said it at the beginning of this podcast that you were a youth pastor, people's brains immediately go to, oh, he did that full time, that was his job.
No.
You weren't paid a penny for it.
No.
But running a full youth ministry.
Yeah.
So tell us how that was, and actually just get really honest at how that was, doing that without the financial backing of it.
Yeah, so I joined an internship at my church to plant it. I went from let's convert it to dollars, $3,000 a month job to a $800 a month job. So I could then serve and help and plant and do all.
So you quit your job and went in another one that was paying less so that you could do youth ministry and not be paid.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Because like ultimately when I was 16, God called me to youth ministry, and I went away from him. So I felt like I owed him that at least. So it was like, no question, let's drop it. Let's do what we can do at this church. And it was great at the beginning because everyone was in the same boat, right? There's this whole team planting a church. The problems were our problems. And then we'd work it together. And then gradually we all started getting full-time jobs. Some didn't become pastors, just serving at the church, and they had the freedom to do whatever.
Didn't you all live in one house?
Yeah, I didn't live in the house at the beginning. So the past maybe year and a half, we lived in the same house. It's like 8 people living in one home.
Wow.
Yeah.
All doing ministry without being paid.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And which was the blessing, right? Was like we didn't pay much rent. It was like we tied to the church, and they provide that home to us.
Did you ever find that there was any kind of power trips, any power tension that was like, because everyone's at the same quote unquote level, meaning everyone's a volunteer and running this church, but no one's being paid? Was there ever like tense moments of, this is my role, this is yours, stay out my lane, but there wasn't the backing of, this is the position that I'm being paid for? You know what I'm saying? Like, how did you navigate those kind of things?
Yeah, I think the role we were given, that is the lane we stayed in, and we were quite good at that. We would help each other when we needed to, especially with like the worship team. We had a young worship team, so that meant that as a youth pastor, I would help some of the youth with that and stuff like that. I think maybe looking at the senior pastors or the pastors that were getting funded from elsewhere, like they saw like maybe COVID is the easiest ministry they ever had, but the rest of the team was like, we're working full-time jobs. We've never done COVID before. We're now doing Zoom church, Zoom youth, Zoom conferences. And it's like, whilst also trying to maintain a job coming out of COVID, that was hard. And I think there's a lot of animosity between leaders, and that kind of hurt the leadership team at the beginning, because our pastor was saying, this is the easiest ministry I've ever done. And you're going, oh yeah, it is for you, but I'm burnt out, or I'm tired, or I have to keep going, even though like, and for me, it was a bit harder because I had cancer, and then 4 months later we went into lockdown, right? And I became the youth pastor 4 months after getting the all clear. So I think for me, there was not a lot of time of processing, which maybe amplified the situations we were going through.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I just think it's really unique and something that in British culture, that in church, that needs to be brought here, was that you're very casually saying points that are just not a thing here. As in, like, you just said, like, oh, people just kind of knew their role and they stayed in their lane. Like, I just think that's very difficult for the overall church here.
Wow.
Especially in young college students. It's people, I mean, let's just say how it is. Like, something that's really popular right now within college students here in Phoenix is to start ministries that are not in association with a local church, is to, let me just start something. And one of the things that I'm observing, and I'm open to being wrong, is the reason that there's constantly ministry starting is because they're disappointed or angry that those things are not existing in their church. But instead of trying to build that and be patient at their church, they just start their own.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really tense thing right now, that especially me as a college pastor with 400 plus students coming, it's how do you make a culture that is, this is my role right now and I'm going to stay in that lane. Like it's almost preached to not stay in your lane. It's almost told to students that the sexy, attractive thing right now is to, if it's not existing, you start it and don't care about what anyone says. And so what I'm hearing from your church and that church plant was all of you were all in with the church that you were planting, and you did your part and you supported each other. That's just really special.
Yeah.
And unique. And despite the hardships that came with that church in the future that we can get into, and probably the next episode, is that's something that I would love to see here in America, is people being sold out for the purpose and the mission of the church, not the mission to be on staff, or to have something that fits you perfectly, or to let me start something that I like.
Yeah, it's interesting. Even the conversations I've had whilst I've been here, that is people's first thought. Like, hey, I want to be in ministry full time.
Yeah.
And I think there is something special about, if you see a need in your church and you're not the pastor, that doesn't mean that because you don't have a pastor's title, you don't have the authority.
Yes.
So it's like, Dan's in the room. So like, if I saw something that was maybe needed in kids, youth, I'd be like, Dan, how about this? Mm-hmm. And then that's on your leader to let you go in that environment and build it. Because I think the people that are going to set something up, it's like, okay, what's the difference between me doing this not full time on my own,
right,
and the difference between not doing it full time in my church? Is because you get the reward, right? Not your church. And so it's interesting, that mindset of selfishness and not being trusted with the little thing. Right? It's a biblical concept, right? It's like, be trusted with the little thing, and then you'll be entrusted with the big thing.
Right.
Little and big in culture, you can say what's, for me, 400 students, big. 400 Christians in one room, big. But for me, if I was going to start something, 20 people praying for the city is huge.
Yeah.
Right. And that concept, we put it into our culture thinking big as thousands. But if you're trusted in your own ministry or in your pastor's ministry just to serve 2 people, it's huge. So that needs to change, I think, over here. And it'll be interesting if full-time ministry was taken away from people, how many people would still serve.
Right. That's really good. I think, and we'll have people on this podcast and this platform that will disagree with me. So first we'll say that this isn't always going to be a place that is people like Connor, who's my best friend, who we're really aligned with a lot of things that we believe about Christianity and church. We'll have people on here that we will wade through tensions. And the reason I mentioned the one of starting ministries is because that's one that is tense for me right now. It now is like a trend within college students who I pastor, that this is the way to go, is to, if it doesn't exist in your church, you make it happen, but not in your church and somewhere else. And I think what I'm seeing in students is complaining is really contagious and really attractive. So now complaining isn't seen as negativity. Complaining is now brought in a light of, I'm complaining about this, but guess what? I'm going to fix it. But I'm not going to fix it in the church that I love. I'm going to fix it by just making my own and kind of being, they wouldn't say they are, and I don't think they're meaning to be, but kind of rebellious to it. And I heard a quote this week that said, are you pointing out darkness, or are you revealing light? And I think something that's popular right now that will get you a very followed platform as just a person or as a Christ follower, as a pastor, is to just point out darkness instead of revealing light that's within it.
Yeah.
And so, like, I mentioned this in a message recently at our college ministry, but it was, for some reason, in every other sphere of life, we see that everything's not perfect and we'll keep going.
Yeah.
But if the church is imperfect, then we'll dip and go somewhere else or start our own. And in England, I just don't see that. I just feel like people, I mean, I'm not saying there's never a time to leave your church and find somewhere else, but most of the time it's just a hurdle.
Yeah.
And you just have to jump over it or find a solution. And I don't know, in England, we see this here at our church, that there's people at our church who have been here since it opened in 1970. But I saw that more in England at our church in Preston, where it was, oh, these people have been around for 10 plus years. And from what I know, they're still there right now. And it's been 10 years since I left and moved to America. So it's just, I think that's a really tense thing for me right now. And I'm not against people starting good things. I just want them to see that the church is not a finished house. It's being built, is what it says in Ephesians. It says it's a spiritual house being built. So if it's being built, then it's a construction site. I mean, it's messy, meaning there's things that are going to break and it's not going to go right sometimes. Today, my car right now just got towed to a mechanic because it's not working. But just because one thing isn't working doesn't mean I'm suddenly just going to throw this away and say, hey, to this mechanic shop, you can keep my car. I'm going to go get another one. No, I actually can't afford to do that.
Yeah.
What I can afford to do is do what means necessary to fix it. And that will still be mine. You know, what do you have to say to that as we're finishing out here?
I think that view in England is a bit different.
Okay.
I think for me, we planted a church with non-Christians.
Yes.
Right. So we'd get the Christians that have been at loads of churches throughout the town and then come to us and then complain. This isn't right. This isn't and there's a reason why they're hopping churches, right? Because nothing's ever right.
Right.
And then you've got the ones that, like, Christians been there a long time. You introduce a smoke machine. Oh no, that's not right. And they don't want to serve underneath the pastor's vision.
Right.
Then our pastor always said, I'd rather listen to one non-Christian wanting to change something in our service than 100 Christians.
Right. That's a tense thing that, like, I agree with you, but a lot of people will say the church shouldn't attend to the world, attend to non-Christians. It should attend to the people who are there, who are being poured into as Christ followers, so that we can go out. So there's like that, and I agree with both. But if a non-Christian can come into your church and leave feeling the same or not be challenged, then you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And so you have to, I like that you said that you're like, I would rather listen to someone who's not a Christian and see what the issue is of why you don't want to be involved with this and go from there, you know?
Yeah, I think there's a fine line when you listen to a non-Christian come into church.
Yeah.
Whether you accept the culture of the world into your church and change it to adapt to the culture, or if it's just like, that was a long preach, that was a long message. Like, we never did a message over 30 minutes long.
Yeah.
Because we were, trying to reach the youth as well, and we all know that youth don't have a long attention span. So it's like, okay, we shorten our messages, or we'll get two people preaching.
Yeah.
Do a 2-part preach where it's 2 different voices, and they stay switched on to that preach. Right. So there's that side, and then there's a side that you don't, I want this. Well, that's not very...
Right. It's see a need, fill a need.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just being tamed into what's been working for a really long time. I mean, my dad says this all the time. The thing that destroys the church the most is saying, we've always done it this way. You have to find new ways. It's not changing the message. It's not changing the scripture. It's not changing what the gospel message is. But method of how to distribute that is important. But when we do it wrongly, it's not an excuse for Christ followers to run away.
Yeah.
and to find somewhere that does it perfect. You need to be a difference. And so in closing here, my last little point here is this. I was listening to someone else speak about this recently, and it's this mindset of, are we trying to build towers or are we trying to make a garden? And that's what the church should be, tending a garden, not building a tower and trying to just build to get as high as we possibly can. It's making a place that in due season, things will grow. In a garden, things are not always fruitful. It's not every single day of 365 days of the year, things are fruitful and things are being grown. It's you do your part as a gardener to plant the seed, to make good soil, and eventually, in due time, in God's decision, things will be fruitful. And that doesn't just mean growth in numbers. That means growth in people being discipled, in becoming leaders amongst leaders, in growing in knowledge and application to the scripture. Those can only happen when good soil and good seed has been planted. And then when it's in God's timing and his decision, things will be fruitful. But it's that tower mindset, kind of like the Tower of Babel, of let's just build as high as we possibly can to get where we want to be and do it fast. But a garden is slow, and a garden is tending to things that are needed at that due time. Like I remember my grandparents always had a garden in their backyard that would grow tomatoes and other kinds of fruit, and most of the year there was nothing there, but every single day they were out there making sure that there could be. But what if people in the church are saying, oh, this isn't looking fruitful right now where I'm at. I'm going to go somewhere that is always visibly seeing fruit. Or you be somewhere and I'm going to go and tend to this soil in the winter season and stay there and be faithful. Because God is faithful in his love for you. You should be faithful in your love for his bride too. Yeah. Connor, thank you for being on.
No, thank you for having me.
Appreciate you, and I love you. I don't want you to leave to go back home. Connor's going back home soon in the next couple of days, back to England, but we're praying and hoping that he's out here. So if you're watching this, pray that Connor wins this green card lottery and we'll be out here in Phoenix, Arizona. But I love you guys. Thanks for tuning in. This was Waiting, and I'm excited to move through another tension of life and church in the next one. See you guys.